everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and welcome to another video full of Easter eggs. Today we're going to go through the Easter eggs that we found in episode 3 of season 1, Boom. Now, this was obviously the grand return of Stephen Moffat, and he certainly gave a lot of callbacks to his own work and previous episodes in this specific episode. So, just for a little bit of fun, we're going to have a moth counter happening during this video. Let's see how many times he managed to reference his own work. Number 21. Right from the cold open, we are introduced to John Francis Vater, which is a great name. Now, Vater's dad status is a really important element to this episode. So rather fittingly, Vater is actually the German word for father. So he's actually John Francis' father. And actually, now I think about it, father also has the connotations of the Anglican Marines, you know, they're religious beings. So that father element actually works with regards to that as well. That just came to my head just then. Yeah, smart thinking, Ellie. And also, if anyone else thought that this guy was going to turn out to be a young Father Octavian from the time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, then don't worry, because we also kind of thought that was going to be the case, and that would have been really cool. Number 20. Let's get this one out of the way. Obviously, we've kind of come to expect it at this point, but we have yet another appearance from Susan Twist. Right in the cold open this time, although she is present throughout the majority of the episode, and she is the ambulance interface. So Susan Twist, again, let's just reiterate, is the name of the actress, not the character. But she has appeared in 5 different roles so far in the last 7 episodes. So we had Isaac Newton's maid, Mrs. Merridew, in Wild Blue Yonder. We had a woman in a pub in the church on Ruby Road. We had a comms officer in Space Babies, a tea lady in the Devil's Court, and now we have the ambulance interface here in Boom. Who she is, what exactly is going on with her, we don't really know at this point, but we do know from some of the trailers that we will meet her properly and the Doctor will meet her, so she is relevant overall, although at this point we're not entirely sure how. Number 19. So on the ambulance screen, we see that John Francis Vater's profession is listed as an Anglican Marine. So there's our first one for the moth counter, because these play a major part in Moffat lore. So the idea of the church being an army was actually introduced in the 11th Doctor story, The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. And that's where we met Bishop Father Octavian, who I just mentioned a little while ago, alongside his group of clerics, which included good old Sacred Bob.
He's their bishop, they're his clerics. It's the 51st century, the church has moved on.
And then there was an entire army of Anglican Marines in another 11th Doctor story, which was A Good Man Goes to War, where they were actually pitted against the Doctor when a branch of the church led by Madame Kovarian went rogue. And then we later visited the church headquarters in 11's final story, The Time of the Doctor. So this was basically a through line throughout the entirety of the 11th Doctor's run, and it was really nice to see it revisited here. Number 18. So sticking with that ambulance interface, it mentions that it's part of the Villengard Corporation. So as the Doctor then later explains, Villengard is one of the biggest weapons manufacturers in the universe. Also, part of Moffat lore. Villengard first popped up in Stephen Moffat's other first story in a Russell T Davies era of the show, in The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, where the 9th Doctor comments that Captain Jack Harkness's sonic blaster is a weapon from the factories of Villengard in the 51st century. And then 12 years later, Moffat actually visited Villengard in Twice Upon a Time, which was his final episode as showrunner, so it was this nice little full circle moment to incorporate this same place. And in that episode, the 12th Doctor visits the weapon forges of Villengard, which is now in ruin, where he goes to seek help from good old Rusty the Dalek. Number 17. So after Vater's death, we cut to this sweeping cinematic shot where the camera pushes right in on the TARDIS and then the Doctor opens the doors. So as many of you might already know, we did mention this previously in some of our other videos, but Boom was filmed using these giant LED screens which had the surrounding planet displayed on in real time, as opposed to a giant green screen with that background being put in post-production. But a really cool detail with regards to this shot in particular is that the TARDIS interior is actually being displayed on that LED screen. So if you took the TARDIS doors away, you'd still be able to see the inside of the TARDIS, which was actually projected on the screen behind Ncuti Gatwa. Honestly, this has been achieved so well that you wouldn't even really notice. Number 16. So right before the title sequence, the Doctor stands on a landmine. Now, if this rings a bell, this scenario rings a bell to you, that's because this isn't actually the first time that this has happened to the Doctor. As confirmed by Stephen Moffat, one of his inspirations for Boom was the 1975 serial Genesis of the Daleks, where the fourth Doctor also stands on a landmine, although not for anywhere near as long as 15 has to here, and not on one leg. And I guess spoiler alert, because 4 doesn't blow up because his companion, Harry Sullivan, wedges some rocks under the mine and allows the Doctor to move his foot. Now, in reference to this, the BBC One continuity announcer for Boom on Saturday night actually said, "Where's Harry Sullivan when you need him?"
Now on BBC One Wales, where's Harry Sullivan when you need him?
Which was actually a really nice little reference to all those years ago and to those people in the know to this connection to Genesis of the Daleks. So hats off to the continuity guy, even though he probably was given a script. But I like to think that he just ad-libbed that line because he was a big Doctor Who fan. Number 15. So after the Doctor has stepped on the landmine, after the title sequence, Ruby then steps out of the TARDIS and goes looking for the Doctor, and she can hear him singing. And the Doctor then explains that he's singing the Skyboat song to get his Zen on. Now, the Skyboat song is an old Scottish song, and it's been one of the Doctor's go-to tunes almost since the very beginning. So the second Doctor actually plays this on his recorder in the 1968 serial The Web of Fear, after he and Jamie and Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, he's not actually a brigadier at this point, are captured by the Yeti. And then decades later, the Spy Master would then also play the Skyboat song on the recorder once again in The Power of the Doctor after he hijacks the 13th Doctor's regeneration. Number 14. So the Doctor tells Ruby that he heard someone screaming and that she should go and see if anyone needs help. But he warns Ruby to be careful where she treads as she makes her way up there and that she should take the long way round. Now, here's another one for the Moffat counter, because this is actually a recurring theme or a recurring phrase throughout the tenure of Stephen Moffat as showrunner. In the 50th anniversary, the day of the Doctor, 11 says that he's going home to Gallifrey the long way round. Then, when the 12th Doctor made it back to Gallifrey in Heaven Sent, he said that he arrived the long way round.
Tell him I came the long way round.
Now also, there's Twice Upon a Time, where the 12th Doctor is wrestling with whether or not he should regenerate and carry on. And the first Doctor asks him what he's going to do, and 12 replies, "You'll find out the long way round." You get where I'm going with this, right? He uses that phrase quite often in his scripts. Number 13. After Ruby does leave the crater, she spots an ambulance in the distance and she says to the Doctor that the only thing she can see is a flashy light thing. Now, this is a very specific description, and we would put money on Stephen Moffat having pulled this directly from his 2010 episode A Christmas Carol, where the 11th Doctor describes Kazran Sardik's machine as a big flashy lighty thing multiple times throughout the episode. It's just another phrase that seems to be quite common in Stephen Moffat's scripts. Number 12. So Ruby then picks up John Francis Vater's vacuum-packed corpse, which is still gross. It shows that he died in the year 5087, which means that Boom takes place in the 51st century. So let's bring up that counter again, because this is yet another Moffat Easter egg. So the 51st century has actually featured quite a lot in Moffat's stories over the years. So as I previously mentioned, the 9th Doctor says that Captain Jack's blaster comes from 51st century villain guard, and Captain Jack himself is a time agent from the 51st century. Then you have the scenes that are set on the SS Madame de Pompadour in The Girl in the Fireplace. That also takes place in the 51st century. Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead also takes place in the 51st century, and so does Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. Then you have Deep Breath, which featured the SS Marie Antoinette, which was the sister ship of the SS Madame de Pompadour, which was also from the 51st century. Setting Boom in the 51st century actually made it a lot easier for Moffat to incorporate things such as the Villain Guard and the Anglican Marines into the story. And we know from previous stories set in the 51st century that all of these things were active during that time, so it actually helped him bring back these familiar characters and settings and plot threads. Number 11. So throughout the episode, we see a burnt-out spaceship in the background. It's probably most prominent in the scene where the Doctor tells Ruby what the casket is. Now, if this spaceship looks familiar, that's because, as revealed in the accompanying episode of Unleashed, it was used in the Star Beast as the Meeps escape pod, and basically it was just repurposed here for this episode. They stripped it down, set it on fire. Hey presto, reduce, reuse, recycle. Number 10. So, after Ruby does hand the Doctor Vader's casket and then he manages to get his foot on the ground, the lights on the landmine actually start to tick up. He starts to run out of time, and so he tells himself this little rhyme, poem thing to try and calm his adrenaline. Now, one of the lines in that rhyme is "the moon and the president's wife," which is yet another Moffat reference. So in the Series 9 opener, Clara asks Missy why she seems to care about the Doctor all of a sudden, and this is what Missy replies. "Since always, since the Cloister Wars, since the night he stole the moon and the president's wife, since he was a little girl. One of those was a lie. Can you guess which one?" Then, in the finale, the Doctor revisits this, he mentions it again, but he clarifies that it was the president's daughter, not the president's wife, and that he didn't steal the moon, he lost it. Number 9. So the Doctor asks Mundy to tell him about the Castarians, and she says that they might be in the mud or they might be in the fog. But the Doctor mocks her by saying that sentient mud is ridiculous and that he's actually met sentient mud before and that they were lovely girls. And sure enough, the Doctor did meet sentient mud in the Witchfinders, where the 13th Doctor fights a species called the Morax, which are sentient mud creatures that can also possess humans. So that wasn't some throwaway line. This actually did happen.
Sentient mud. Do you know how ridiculous you sound?
Number 8. So when the Doctor is taking Mundy's gunshots to the arm like an absolute trooper, he tells her that he's a complex space-time event and that it would be very, 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 very bad for this planet if his landmine was to blow up. Now, another one for the counter here, because the Doctor previously referred to himself as a complex space-time event in the Moffat episode Flesh and Stone, where he tells River Song that a big complicated space-time event such as himself would be able to seal the nearby crack in time. Now, Moffat also referred to the Doctor in this way in his first official bit of Doctor Who writing, which was actually a short story in the 1996 novel Decalogue 3, Consequences. Number 7. So when everything kicks off and the ambulance heads towards the crater, there's a moment where it scans the environment with this green laser. Now, fittingly for Doctor Who, this might actually be a reference to something that hasn't even happened yet, because if you remember, in the trailers for Season 1, we see a shot of the TARDIS in Unit HQ being scanned by the exact same type of green laser that the ambulance has here in Boom. We would suggest that there's a connection here to Susan Twist in some way, because obviously she is inside the ambulance. We know that she may or may not be playing someone to do with Triad Technologies later on, or it could just be a reused effect. We've got a green laser in the computer database, we'll use that. Number 6. So after Ruby gets shot and is literally laying there on her deathbed asking for her next of kin, it starts snowing, and the Doctor says, while there's snow, there's hope. Well, actually he gets cut off because the snow kind of freezes in midair, but the point is he was supposed to end that sentence with the word hope. This is yet another direct callback to a Moffat line. This time it's from the 12th Doctor episode, The Doctor Falls. So this story sees companion Bill Potts turned into a Cyberman, but when the Doctor sees that she can still cry, he tells her where there's tears, there's hope. And then Bill later repeats the line back to him when he's on the brink of regeneration.
Where there's tears, there's hope.
And actually, while we're talking about 12's regeneration, just a bonus little reference here, but the snow freezing midair in Boom, the exact same effects that we saw in 12's regeneration story Twice Upon a Time, just after he meets the first Doctor. Number 5. So after Kanto gets blown up out of literally nowhere, anyone else still cannot get over how abrupt that was? There's a moment of silence before we then hear his AI hologram in this kind of robotic voice repeating the phrase, "I'm fine, how are you?"
I'm fine, how are you? I'm fine, how are you?
And then later on, we hear John Vater, his hologram, repeating, "Antelope, we saw antelope, and he kind of glitches. Now, this repeating of an innocuous phrase to imply that something sinister has happened is a trick that Moffat famously used in Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead, where the people inside the spacesuits kept repeating the same phrase over and over again, such as, "Hey, who turned out the lights?" or Miss Evangelista with, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. This suggests that their consciousness is fading away, but those phrases are still repeated, and I definitely got those vibes from these repeated things here.
Hey, who turned out the lights? Hey, who turned out the lights?
Number 4. So after saving the day, or rather after actually John Vader saves the day, the Doctor gets his little mic drop moment and he tells Villain Guard, basically, just wait till Daddy gets home. Now this is another one for the Moffat counter, because this absolutely has shades of the 11th Doctor's iconic line, basically, run, which he said in his very first episode. And in both cases, this is basically the Doctor rubbing it into the villain that he defeated them. Number 3, fish fingers and custard is my favourite. Well, that's the best one, isn't it? That's the best Easter egg. So obviously, if you're not familiar, in the 11th hour, when the 11th Doctor is newly regenerated, he has new taste buds and he's trying to figure out what it is he wants to eat. And he throws many things literally out the window, out the door, down the sink, until he settles on fish fingers and custard, which is his new favourite thing to eat. Then later on in the Power of 3, he sits there and enjoys a little catch up with Amy and Rory while they enjoy some fish fingers and custard, and then just before 11 regenerates, he again treats himself to his favourite meal. Now, a lot of people actually commented on our ups and downs that they were disappointed that we didn't give this an up in the ups and downs. Now, in my mind, I was thinking, well, I'll save it for the Easter eggs, but actually, you know what? Let's give it a retroactive up. There's another up for Boom. Number 2, so the Doctor delivers this really great line, which is, "Snow isn't snow until it falls." Now, according to Stephen Moffat in the commentary for this episode, this line was actually originally supposed to be in his 2010 Christmas special, A Christmas Carol, but it ended up being cut. So when he saw the chance to include it now in Boom, he just grabbed that opportunity and added it into the script here. Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, he wrote a ridiculous number of episodes between A Christmas Carol and now, and the fact that he managed to remember a specific line just goes to show how much he cares about what he writes, I guess. And number 1, we have another great line from the Doctor, which closes out the episode actually, and he says, "A sad old man once told me what survives of us is love." And Stephen Moffat actually confirmed that this was lifted from the Philip Larkin poem An Arundel Tomb, which concludes, "Their final blazon and to prove, our almost instinct almost true, what will survive of us is love." Now, love saving the day is a big sentiment for Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who. I mean, in his very first story, you have Nancy's love for Jamie saving the day. And then a little bit later, you have love beating the villain in both of James Corden's stories with Craig. So I think this is one of those things that he believes is really important in Doctor Who. And that's why he wanted to reinforce it yet again, both with this line, but also just with the whole concept of John Vader saving the day through his love for his daughter, Splice. And that is all the Easter eggs that we managed to find in this episode, Boom. If we missed one that you spotted, let us know in the comments down below, and make sure if you haven't already, you've checked out the Ups and Downs review and the discussion video for this episode. In the meantime though, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.